bathroom tiles were cold beneath her bare feet. The kind of cold that made her toes curl involuntarily, that sent a shiver racing up her calves. Maya pressed her palm against the white subway tile, feeling the grout lines rough under her fingertips, and breathed in the steam from the shower she'd just turned off. Lavender body wash, his favorite. The scent coiled through the air like a ghost, floral and cloying. The same smell that had clung to her skin every morning for 3 years. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, watching condensation creep across the glass in slow, crawling tendrils. 28 years old, dark circles under her eyes that no concealer could quite hide. A small scar on her collarbone from when she'd slipped on these same tiles, rushing to answer his phone call 2 years ago. Or was it 2 years from now? Oh, the thought made her grip the edge of the sink. Don't think about it. Not yet. She reached for her toothbrush, but her hand froze halfway. Blue bristles, angled head, the same brand she'd used before in that other life, the life that had ended with her lying on a different bathroom floor, in a different apartment, staring at a different ceiling while her pulse grew fainter and fainter, and the pill bottle rolled across the marble, empty. Maya's breath caught. No, stop! She grabbed the toothbrush so hard the plastic creaked. Squeezed mint toothpaste onto the bristles, brushed her teeth with mechanical precision, counting to 30 for each quadrant, just like the dentist recommended. The familiar rhythm steadied her, brought her back into her body, into this moment, this bathroom. This second chance she didn't understand and couldn't explain. Through the door, she could hear him moving around the kitchen, the clink of a spoon against ceramic, the hiss of the coffee machine. James always woke up before her, always had coffee ready, always timed it perfectly so that she could stumble out of the bedroom and find a steaming mug waiting on the counter, prepared exactly the way she liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of cream, heated to the precise temperature where she could drink it immediately without burning her tongue. It was one of the things she'd loved about him. In the beginning, she spit, rinsed, and set the toothbrush back in its holder. Stared at herself in the clearing mirror. Her reflection looked back with eyes that knew too much, had seen too far. They carried memories of events that hadn't happened yet. Or had they? Time was a circle, wasn't it? A loop? A knock on the door made her jump. Babe, coffee's ready. His voice was warm, gentle. The voice of a man in love. The voice he'd used for the first year. Maybe the first year and a half. Coming, she called back, and her voice sounded normal, bright, unchanged by everything she knew. She pulled on her robe, soft terry cloth, white, another thing he'd bought for her, and opened the door. James stood in the hallway, smiling that crooked smile that had first caught her attention at the bookstore 4 years ago. Tall, lean, with sandy brown hair that fell across his forehead in a way that made him look boyish despite being 32. He wore his work clothes, charcoal slacks, a crisp white button-down, the tie hanging loose around his neck. He unnodded, waiting for her to tie it. She always tied his ties. "Morning, beautiful," he said, and leaned in to kiss her forehead. Maya let him, felt the press of his lips against her skin, counted to 3 in her head before stepping back. "Morning," she replied, moving past him toward the kitchen. The apartment was modest, 1 bedroom, an open-plan living area that flowed into the kitchen, large windows that looked out over the city. They were on the 14th floor, high enough that the traffic noise from the street below was muted, distant, like the ocean heard through a shell. The morning light slanted through the windows in golden bars, catching dust motes that drifted lazy and unconcerned through the air. Her mug sat on the counter, exactly where she knew it would be. Blue ceramic with a chip on the handle. She'd dropped it once, and James had superglued it back together. "Good as new," he'd said, though it never quite sat right in her hand after that. She lifted the mug and sipped. Perfect temperature. Perfect sweetness. "I was thinking," James said, moving to the coffee machine to pour his own cup. Black, no sugar. "Maybe we could have dinner at Marcello's tonight. Celebrate?" Maya's hand tightened on the mug. "Celebrate what?" He turned, eyebrows raised, that expression of amused surprise he wore when he thought she was being deliberately obtuse. "Us, Maya. Celebrate us. You moving back in, getting past all the—" He waved a hand vaguely. "The rough patch." Rough patch? As if it were a temporary inconvenience. A detour, not a 3-year descent into a hell so subtle she hadn't recognized it until she was buried too deep to claw her way out. She made herself smile. "Marcello's sounds perfect." "Yeah?" His whole face lit up. God, he was good at this. at seeming genuine, at making every moment feel like the most important thing in his world. I'll make a reservation for 7. Wear that dress I like. The green one. The green dress. The one with the high neck and the hem that fell just below her knees. The one that covered everything. The one he'd bought for her after she'd worn a sundress to brunch with his parents, and he'd spent the entire car ride home explaining in that patient, reasonable voice how she'd embarrassed him, how his mother had been uncomfortable, how she needed to be more aware of how she presented herself. She'd stopped wearing sundresses after that. The green one, she agreed and took another sip of coffee. James checked his watch. A Rolex. So inherited from his father, worn but expensive, the kind of thing that whispered wealth without shouting it. I should head out soon. Big presentation at 10. He crossed the kitchen to where she stood, slid his arms around her waist, pulled her close. She could smell his cologne, cedar and bergamot, the scent of it so familiar it made her stomach turn. I'm really glad you're here, Maya. Really glad you gave me another chance. I know I messed up, but I'm going to make it right this time. I promise. His promises had always sounded so sincere. She set down her coffee mug and reached up to knot his tie. Her fingers moved automatically, the muscle memory so ingrained she could do it with her eyes closed. Loop, cross, tuck, pull. The silk slid smooth between her fingers. She straightened the knot, smoothed down the fabric. May let her hands rest briefly on his chest. I know you will, she said, and meant something entirely different than he thought. He kissed her then, soft and sweet. The kind of kiss that tasted like promises, like futures, like lies. I'll text you later, he said, grabbing his briefcase from beside the door. Love you. Love you too. The door clicked shut behind him. Maya stood in the kitchen, listening to his footsteps recede down the hallway, waiting for the distant ding of the elevator. When silence settled back over the apartment, she finally allowed herself to breathe. She walked to the window and looked out over the city. September sunlight painted the buildings in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere down there, people were living their lives, going to work, buying coffee, making plans, fighting with lovers, making up with lovers, existing in the beautiful, terrible muddle of their first and only lives. Maya was on her second. She didn't know how, didn't know why. All she knew was that 3 days ago, she'd been 41 years old, lying on cold bathroom tiles in a penthouse apartment in the Upper East Side, surrounded by empty pill bottles and emptier promises, while her heart forgot how to beat. She'd felt the life drain out of her like water circling a drain, slow and inevitable and almost peaceful at the end. And then she'd woken up here, in this apartment, in this body, 13 years younger, 3 days after she and James had broken up the first time, when he'd shown up at her door with flowers and tears and that voice that could make anything sound reasonable, begging for another chance. The first time, she'd said yes because she loved him. This time, she'd said yes because she knew what he would become, what he would do, how he would chip away at her piece by piece until there was nothing left but a hollow woman who smiled at parties and lied to her therapist and swallowed pills on a Tuesday morning because it seemed easier than living another day. This time, she had a plan. Maya turned from the window and surveyed the apartment. His apartment, technically. The lease was in his name, but over the past 3 days, she'd moved her things back in, box by box, smile by smile, her books on the shelf, her clothes in the closet, her name on the mailbox. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, scrolled past grocery lists and meeting reminders to the entry she'd created that first morning when she'd woken up gasping in her old apartment, young again, alive again, weighed terrified and determined in equal measure. The plan, she'd titled it simply, Phase 1, Move Back in Phase 2, Establish Residency Phase 3, Change the Locks, Phase 4, Legal Documentation Phase 5, Leave. She'd completed Phase 1, 3 days of pretending to be the Maya she used to be, young, hopeful, willing to believe his promises because she hadn't yet learned that James's promises had expiration dates. 3 days of smiling and kissing and acting like this was a reconciliation instead of a heist. Phase 2 was already underway. She'd updated her address with the post office, had mail delivered here, made sure her driver's license listed this apartment. In New York, if you could prove you'd lived somewhere for 30 days, you had rights. Tenant rights, rights that couldn't be dissolved with a smile and a credit card. Today was Phase 3. Maya finished her coffee and set the mug in the sink, walked to the bedroom and pulled out her laptop, opened a browser window and typed, 24-hour locksmith near me. The locksmith arrived at 11, a stocky man in his 50s with graying temples and calloused hands that spoke of decades of working with metal and mechanisms. His van was parked illegally in front of the building, hazard lights blinking. "You're sure about this?" he asked, examining the existing lock. "This is a Schlager deadbolt. Good quality, not cheap to replace." "I'm sure," Maya said. "I want the best you have, something secure." He nodded slowly, pulled out a catalog, showed her options. She selected a high-security lock with restricted keyways, the kind where you needed authorization to get copies made, the kind that cost 3 times what a normal lock cost. "And I only want 2 keys," she added. "Both for me?" The locksmith's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't comment. He'd probably seen stranger things. Messier divorces, uglier breakups, situations where changing the locks was the least dramatic thing happening. "You got it," he said, and got to work. The drilling was loud. Sharp whines of metal on metal, the screech of the old lock being removed, the precise cuts needed for the new mechanism. Maya stood in the kitchen, watching, feeling each sound vibrate through her chest like a second heartbeat. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. "Presentation went great. Can't wait to see you tonight. Already counting down the hours." She typed back, "So proud of you. See you at 7. Added a heart emoji, the kind she used to send him before she'd learned that he'd checked her phone, that he had all her passwords, that he could see every message she sent and every friend she talked to and every thought she tried to keep private. This phone was new, bought 3 days ago with cash, activated under her name only. No shared accounts, no linked devices, no way for him to access it. Some lessons you learned the hard way. But if you were lucky, impossibly, inexplicably lucky, you got a chance to apply them. The locksmith finished in 45 minutes, showed her how the new lock worked, demonstrated the key, handed her both copies in a small manila envelope. "That'll be $450, he said. Maya paid in cash. Another lesson learned. Credit cards left trails. James had always been so helpful with money, so generous, offering to put her expenses on his cards to help her build credit. It had taken her years to realize that help had been chains. "Thank you," she said, and meant it more than the locksmith could possibly know. After he left, she stood in front of the door, testing the lock. Key in, turn, click. Key out, turn, click. Smooth and solid and utterly final. Phase 3, complete. She spent the afternoon preparing. Went to the bank, opened a new account at a different institution, transferred her savings, what little she'd managed to save in this younger life. Went to the post office, rented a P.O. box, filled out change of address forms to redirect her mail starting next week, went to a storage facility in Brooklyn, rented a unit, paid for 3 months in advance. By the time she returned to the apartment, it was 5:30. 2.5 hours until James came home. Maya stood in the bedroom, looking at her clothes hanging in the closet next to his, her books mixed with his on the shelves, her toothbrush in the bathroom, her coffee mug in the kitchen, all the small markers of a life shared and intertwined. In another timeline, she'd lived here for 3 years, had watched as James slowly, methodically isolated her from everyone who might have helped her see what was happening, had felt herself shrinking, dimming, becoming smaller and quieter and more accommodating until she barely recognized herself, had married him eventually, a beautiful wedding at his parents' estate in Connecticut, white roses and string quartets, and 200 guests who'd raised glasses to toast their happiness, had moved to the Upper East Side, to a penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home, full of furniture she hadn't chosen and art she didn't understand, and rules about how to be the right kind of wife for a man like James. Had tried to leave once. When she was 35, had packed a bag, made it as far as the door before he'd found her, and oh, the tears he'd cried, the promises he'd made, the way he'd convinced her that she was overreacting, that marriage was hard, that everyone went through rough patches, that she was being dramatic and selfish and cruel to throw away everything they'd built over some perceived issues that existed only in her head. She'd stayed. Of course she'd stayed. Because by then, she'd believed him. Believed that the problem was her, not him. That she was too sensitive, too emotional, too difficult to love. Had spent 6 more years in that penthouse, taking pills for anxiety and depression and insomnia, seeing a therapist James had chosen who told her she needed to work on her communication skills and her unrealistic expectations. Had stopped seeing her friends, stopped calling her family, Stopped doing anything that might upset the delicate balance of keeping James happy. Had woken up one Tuesday, looked at herself in the mirror, and realized she didn't want to do it anymore. Any of it. Living, pretending, smiling through another charity gala where James would introduce her as my better half while his hand rested possessively on her lower back. The pills had been easier than she'd expected. Quiet, no mess, just a gradual dimming like a light bulb slowly losing power. And then, light. Brightness. The shock of being alive again. Young again, standing in her old apartment, her phone buzzing with messages from James begging her to reconsider, to give him another chance, promising he'd change, promising he'd be better, promising everything. Maya pulled herself back to the present. Checked the time, 6 o'clock. She needed to get ready for dinner. She showered again, washing away the day, and wrapped herself in a towel. Stood in front of the closet, looking at the green dress hanging there like a ghost of who she used to be. She pulled it out, held it up. The fabric was soft, expensive. James never bought cheap things. The neckline hit just at her collarbone, the sleeves came to her elbows, the skirt fell demurely below her knees. A dress designed to hide, to protect, to keep her safe from the judgment of people whose opinions mattered to James more than her comfort. Till Maya hung it back up and reached for something else. A red dress, sleeveless, with a hemline that stopped mid-thigh. Something she'd owned before James. Before she'd learned to dress for his approval, something she'd packed away in a box and forgotten about until 3 days ago, when she'd been moving her things back in and had found it folded at the bottom of her suitcase, a reminder of who she used to be. She put it on. The fabric clung to her curves, vibrant against her skin. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. This Maya was bold, visible, unafraid. This Maya was done hiding. She did her makeup, red lips to match the dress, dark eyeliner that made her eyes look fierce, left her hair down instead of pulling it back into the neat ponytail James preferred. Slipped on heels that added 3 inches to her height. When she was finished, she looked like someone James would have been attracted to at the beginning, before he'd started the slow work of remaking her into someone more acceptable. Her phone buzzed at 6:45. Leaving the office now. Be there in 15? Can't wait to see you. Maya picked up her purse, a small clutch just big enough for her phone, wallet, and keys. The new keys. She slipped them into the inner pocket, zipped it shut. 15 minutes? Enough time? She walked through the apartment one last time, checking. Her laptop was in her bag. Her important documents, passport, birth certificate, social security card, were already in the storage unit in Brooklyn. Her clothes would stay for now. She'd retrieve them later, when she had time and space and didn't need to rush. Everything else, the furniture, the dishes, the decorative objects James had chosen, could stay. She didn't want any of it. The only thing she took was a photograph from the bookshelf. Her and her sister from before James had suggested that maybe Maya was spending too much time with her family, that maybe it was creating distance between them, that maybe she needed to prioritize their relationship. Before the phone calls had dwindled to texts, the text to silence, the silence to a chasm that Maya had convinced herself was normal, necessary, the price of love. She slipped the photo into her purse next to the keys. At 6:58, she heard footsteps in the hallway, the sound of someone approaching the door, the jingle of keys. James's key slid into the lock, turned, stopped, turned again, stopped. Maya? His voice came through the door, confused. Did you put the chain on? She walked to the door, stood on the other side, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. No, she called back, no chain. The lock's not working. Can you open it from inside? No. A pause, longer this time. What do you mean, no? I mean, the lock works fine, James. I changed it. Silence. She could almost hear him processing, trying to fit this information into a framework that made sense, that aligned with the narrative he'd built about who they were, what they were doing, where this was heading. You changed the lock? His voice was still controlled, still reasonable. Why would you do that? Because it's my apartment now? Maya, this is my apartment, my lease, I've been living here for 30 days, James. I have mail delivered here. My license lists this address. In New York, that makes me a legal tenant. You can't just kick me out. She heard him try the lock again, harder this time, frustrated. Maya, open the door. This is ridiculous. We can talk about this. We don't need to talk about it. Maya. His voice rose slightly, the first crack in the facade. Open the fucking door. She flinched, old instinct, old fear, then steadied herself. He couldn't reach her, couldn't touch her, couldn't use his voice and his presence and his perfect logic to convince her that up was down and she was crazy for thinking otherwise. No, she said, and the word felt like power. You can't do this. This is insane. You moved back in. You said you wanted to work things out. We have dinner reservations. I know. You know? She heard him take a breath, forcing calm. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, the voice of reason, the voice that had talked her into staying so many times before. Maya, sweetheart, I don't understand what's happening. Did I do something to upset you? Let's just talk about this, okay? Like adults. Let me in and we can sit down and figure out what's going on. I already know what's going on, James. You're not making any sense. I'm making perfect sense. You just don't like what I'm saying. Another pause. She could picture him on the other side of the door, running his hand through his hair, that gesture he made when he was stressed, thinking, calculating, trying to find the angle that would get him what he wanted. Maya, be reasonable. All your stuff is in there. Your clothes, your books. You can't just lock me out of my own apartment. Actually, I can, and I am. This is theft. No, it's me exercising my tenant rights. You want me out? File an eviction. But that takes months, James. Months of court dates and paperwork and judges asking why you'd want to evict your girlfriend who's been living here legally. Months of people asking questions about our relationship. About why I'd changed the locks. About what you might have done to make me feel unsafe. She heard his breathing change. Faster. Harder. I would never hurt you, Maya. You know that. Do I? Yes. Jesus Christ, what kind of person do you think I am? The kind who made her feel small, the kind who isolated her from everyone who loved her, the kind who controlled what she wore and who she saw and how she spent her time. The kind who was so good at making it all seem like love that she'd believed it for years. The kind who would eventually drive her to a bathroom floor with a bottle of pills. But she didn't say any of that, because James would have explanations for all of it. He always did, reasonable explanations that made her doubt her own reality. I think you should go, she said instead. Go where? This is my home. Find a hotel. Figure it out. You're a resourceful guy. Maya, if you don't leave in the next 5 minutes, I'm calling the police and telling them there's a man outside my door who won't leave. A man who's making me feel unsafe. You wouldn't. Try me. She pulled out her phone, opened it to the keypad, her thumb hovering over the 9. She waited, counting seconds, to feeling sweat prickle at the back of her neck despite the apartment's air conditioning. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, she heard him step back from the door. This isn't over, Maya. His voice was cold now, stripped of warmth, the voice underneath the voice. You can't treat people like this. I gave you everything. I loved you. No, she said softly. You loved the version of me you were creating. The quiet one, the obedient one, the one who existed to make you look good. That's not... You're twisting everything, making me into some kind of villain when all I ever did was love you. Go away, James. We're going to talk about this. When you've calmed down, when you're thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. You're being emotional, irrational. And there it was, the word he'd always used. So irrational, emotional, dramatic, crazy. All the words designed to make her doubt herself, to make her feel like her feelings were invalid, her perceptions flawed, her reality negotiable. Goodbye, James. She heard him slam his hand against the door. Once, twice, then footsteps, angry and sharp, receding down the hallway. Maya stood in the silence, her whole body shaking, her phone clutched in her hand. She waited until she heard the elevator ding, until she was sure he was gone, before she let herself slide down to the floor, her back against the door, her red dress pooling around her like blood. She'd done it. Phase 3 complete. But God, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She didn't sleep that night. Lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every sound amplified. The building settling, pipes groaning, footsteps in the apartment above. Each noise made her tense, made her wonder if he'd come back, if he'd somehow get through the lock, if her plan had been foolish, if she'd made a terrible mistake. But he didn't come back. Not that night. Her phone buzzed constantly. Texts from James that started conciliatory and grew progressively angrier. Maya, please, let's talk. I don't understand what I did wrong. You owe me an explanation. This is childish. You can't just throw away what we have. I'm trying to be patient, but you're being unreasonable. Answer your fucking phone. You're going to regret this. She didn't respond. Watch the messages accumulate like evidence. Screenshots of a man losing control. At 3 a.m, her phone rang. Not James. Her sister. Maya stared at the name on the screen. Rachel. They hadn't spoken in how long? In the other timeline? It had been years. Years of dodged calls and canceled plans and excuses about being busy. About James needing her. About how it was complicated. You wouldn't understand. Her thumb hovered over the answer button. What would she even say? She answered. Maya? Rachel's voice was thick with sleep and concern. Are you okay? I got this weird feeling. I know it's late. I'm sorry, but are you okay? And just like that, Maya was crying. Great, gulping sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. The kind of crying she hadn't allowed herself in years because James didn't like it when she was emotional, because it made him uncomfortable, because she'd learned to swallow everything down until she forgot how to feel it. I'm okay, she managed between sobs. I'm better than okay. Rachel, I did something. Oh, something I should have done a long time ago. What happened? Where are you? Do you need me to come get you? No, I'm at James's apartment. Was at James's apartment. It's complicated. Did he hurt you? Rachel's voice went sharp, protective. Maya, did he? No, not the way you mean, but yes, he hurt me. She took a shaky breath. But I'm out now. I changed the locks. I'm keeping the apartment. He can't get to me anymore. A pause. Holy shit. Maya, are you serious? Yes. Oh my god, I'm so proud of you. Rachel's voice cracked. I've been so worried. You stopped calling, stopped answering, and I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to. Maya, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I pushed you away. She stopped, corrected herself. I let him make me push you away. But I'm done now. I'm done with all of it. They talked until the sky started to lighten, until the city began to wake around them. Rachel made her promise to stay in touch, to call if she needed anything, to let her help in any way she could. Made her promise to come to dinner next week, to meet her kids, to be part of the family again. When Maya finally hung up, the apartment was filled with soft morning light. She felt scraped hollow, exhausted, but also cleaner somehow. Lighter. She got up, made coffee, stood at the window watching the city come alive. People headed to work, to school, to their lives. Normal people living normal days, unaware that somewhere on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown, a woman was standing in an apartment she'd stolen from her ex-boyfriend with a second chance she couldn't explain. Her phone buzzed. Another text from James. I'm coming by at noon. We need to talk about this. Maya typed back. No. You can't keep me out of my own apartment. Watch me. Maya, I'm not playing games. I'll call the police. Go ahead. I'm a legal tenant. I have rights. You show up here, you're trespassing. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, you're making a huge mistake. She didn't respond, turned off her phone, took her coffee back to bed and slept for the first time in 13 years without the weight of James's expectations pressing down on her chest. The next 3 weeks were a strange, suspended kind of existence. Maya went to work. She was a paralegal at a small firm in Chelsea, a job she'd kept in both timelines because James had approved of it. She had thought it made her seem intelligent and capable without being threatening. She moved through her days in a haze of hypervigilance, always watching for James, always expecting him to appear. He sent lawyers. Of course he did. Men in expensive suits who explained politely that Mr. Sterling was willing to overlook this unfortunate incident if Miss Chen would simply vacate the premises and return his property. Maya met with them in the building's lobby, refused to let them up, showed them her lease documentation, her mail, her driver's license, showed them the texts from James, the messages that started loving and ended threatening, showed them her tenant rights, cited the laws she'd spent hours researching. The lawyers went away, came back with new offers. James would pay for her to move. You would give her 3 months' rent for a new place. 6 months. Would forget this whole thing happened if she'd just be reasonable. Maya said no to all of it, Because it wasn't about the apartment. It had never been about the apartment. It was about the fact that for the first time in 2 lifetimes, she'd drawn a line and refused to let him cross it. It was about proving to herself that she could. James tried other approaches, showed up at her work, all charm and confusion, asking her colleagues if they'd seen how stressed she'd been lately, wondering if maybe she needed help, maybe she wasn't thinking clearly. Maya's boss, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane who'd been through her own messy divorce, took one look at the situation and banned James from the building. He sent flowers, letters, gifts, all returned unopened. He tried showing up at the apartment door again, but Maya had installed a camera in the hallway, visible and obvious. The first time he appeared, she called the police. They didn't arrest him. He was too smooth for that, too good at explaining that this was all just a misunderstanding, that he was worried about his girlfriend, that he just wanted to talk. But they did make him leave. And the second time she called, they were less patient. By the third time, they suggested he might want to consider that his continued presence could be considered harassment. He stopped coming to the door after that. But Maya knew he wasn't done. Men like James didn't give up just because the first approach didn't work. They adapted. They found new angles. They waited for the moment you let your guard down. She didn't let her guard down. A month after she'd changed the locks, Rachel came to visit, brought her kids. 2 boys, 8 and 10, loud and energetic and wonderful. They tore through the apartment like small tornadoes, asking questions about everything, touching everything, filling the space with life in a way it had never been filled when James lived there. They're a handful, Rachel said apologetically, but she was smiling. They're perfect, Maya said, and meant it. Over takeout Thai food, while the boys were absorbed in a video game in the living room, Rachel asked the question Maya had been expecting. So what now? What do you mean? I mean, you've got the apartment. You've got your freedom. What are you going to do with it? Maya pushed pad thai around her plate, considering. In her first life, she'd never gotten this far. Never managed to leave. He never found the strength or the clarity or the sheer stubborn determination to say no and mean it. I don't know, she admitted. I've been so focused on getting out that I didn't really think about what comes after. Well, you've got time to figure it out now. Rachel reached across the table, squeezed her hand. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, you can do it now. You're free. Free. The word hung in the air like a promise, like a challenge. That night, after Rachel and the boys left, Maya sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and a notebook. Started making lists. Not plans for escaping or surviving, but plans for living. Things she'd wanted to do before James, before she'd learned to want only what he wanted, to dream only the dreams he approved of. Travel. She'd always wanted to see Japan. Oh, to walk through temples and cherry blossom gardens. James had promised they'd go. Someday, when he had time, when work calmed down, when it was convenient. Someday that never came. Art, she'd painted once. Watercolors mostly. Nothing professional. Just for the joy of it, James had suggested that maybe she was too old to be playing with paints, that maybe she should focus on more practical hobbies. She'd put away her brushes and never taken them out again. People. She'd had friends before, good friends, close friends, friends who'd slowly drifted away as she'd canceled plans and stopped responding to texts and become someone who was always busy, always unavailable, always with James. She could have those things now, could reach for them, could build a life that was hers and hers alone. The thought was terrifying, exhilarating. She was still making lists when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, curiosity, some remnant of her old people-pleasing self that couldn't stand to let a call go to voicemail, made her pick up. Hello? Miss Chen, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the NYPD. I'm calling about James Sterling. Maya's heart stopped. What about him? We have him in custody. He was arrested this evening for breaking and entering. Your building super caught him trying to jimmy the lock on apartment 14C. Your apartment. He's being charged with criminal trespass and attempted burglary. The world tilted. Maya gripped the edge of the table. Is he still there? No, ma'am. He's been taken to the precinct. I'm calling to inform you of the situation and to ask if you'd like to press charges. Yes. The word came out immediately, no hesitation. Yes, I want to press charges. I'll make a note of that. You'll need to come down to the station to give a statement. Would tomorrow work for you? Tomorrow's fine. Thank you for calling. Of course. And Miss Chen, make sure your locks are secure. Change them again if you need to. Men like this, they don't always stop after one arrest. Men like this, as if there were a category, a type, a recognizable pattern, as if she wasn't the only one, as if James's charm and reasonableness and perfect surface were things the detective had seen before, in other men, in other situations. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made Maya feel sick. After she hung up, she sat in the dark apartment, listening to the city sounds filtering up from below. Traffic, sirens, the distant murmur of other people's lives. James had tried to break in, had been so desperate to regain control, so unable to accept that she'd slipped through his fingers, that he'd committed a crime. The man who'd always been so careful, so controlled, so conscious of appearances, reduced to jimmying a lock like a common burglar. The thought should have felt like victory, like vindication. Instead, it just felt sad. Sad for who he might have been if he'd been different. Sad for who she'd been in that other timeline, too scared and too worn down to save herself. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through her contacts, found the number she'd saved 3 weeks ago. The therapist Rachel had recommended, the one who specialized in trauma and abusive relationships. Maya had scheduled an appointment, then canceled it, then rescheduled it, then canceled it again. Too scared of what she might have to confront, too worried about what it would mean to admit that she needed help. She called now, left a voicemail asking for the earliest available appointment. Hung up. Breathed. Felt something settle in her chest, some knot of tension finally starting to loosen. The trial took 6 months. James fought the charges, of course. Hired expensive lawyers who argued that this was a domestic dispute, that emotions were running high, that their client had simply made a mistake in a moment of stress. They painted Maya as vindictive, unstable, someone who'd manipulated the situation to punish a man who'd only ever loved her. Maya sat through the hearings, listened to herself be dissected and analyzed and pathologized. Listened to James's lawyers suggest that she'd wanted him to break in, that she'd somehow encouraged it, that this was all an elaborate scheme to steal his apartment. But the evidence was clear. The super had seen him. The building had security footage. The lock had fresh tool marks. And Maya had records, texts, emails, the police reports from every time he'd shown up unwanted, the restraining order she'd filed after the arrest. James was convicted, not of anything serious. Criminal trespass was a misdemeanor, the kind of thing that usually resulted in a fine and probation. But it was on his record now, a mark, a stain on the perfect surface he'd maintained for so long. The judge also ruled on the apartment. Despite James's lawyer's arguments, despite his lease, and despite everything, the judge sided with Maya. Ruled that she had established tenancy, that she had the right to remain, that James would need to go through formal eviction proceedings if he wanted her out, and given the circumstances, given his conviction, given the restraining order, the judge made it clear that such proceedings would be unlikely to succeed. The apartment was hers. James's face, when the verdict was read, was something Maya would remember forever. Not angry, though there was anger there, simmering beneath, but bewildered. Genuinely confused, as if he couldn't comprehend a world where his charm and his money and his confidence didn't get him what he wanted, as if he couldn't understand that Maya had stopped being someone who could be convinced, persuaded, manipulated into giving him what he wanted. After the trial, Maya didn't see him again. Heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Boston, taken a job there, started over, heard that he was dating someone new, a young associate at his firm. Someone who probably didn't know about the conviction, about the restraining order, about the woman who'd changed the locks and refused to be moved. Maya hoped the new woman would be luckier than she'd been, but she didn't reach out. Didn't warn her. Because what would she say? How do you tell someone that the charming man they're falling in love with is the kind who will slowly, methodically take them apart? They never believe you, not until they've lived it themselves. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. 2 years after she changed the locks, Maya stood in the same apartment. But it didn't look anything like it had when James lived there. The furniture was different, pieces she'd chosen herself, bright colors and comfortable shapes, things that felt like home rather than showroom. The walls were covered in paintings, some bought from local artists, some her own work, watercolors and acrylics that ranged from decent to terrible, but were hers regardless. The bookshelves were full of books she'd actually read, Wanted to read. Books on art and travel and psychology and fiction. No more leather-bound classics chosen because they looked impressive to visitors. The kitchen smelled like ginger and garlic. She was making dinner, experimenting with a recipe she'd found online. Rachel and the boys were coming over. Maybe some friends from her painting class, if they were free. The apartment was warm and messy and lived in and entirely, completely hers. Her phone buzzed, a message from her therapist confirming their appointment for next week. Maya had been seeing Dr. Patterson for 2 years now, working through everything that had happened, learning to recognize the patterns, to understand how she'd gotten to that bathroom floor in a timeline that no longer existed, learning to forgive herself for the choices she'd made when she didn't know any better. The therapy was hard. Some days it felt like she was pulling out splinters one by one, each one painful, each one necessary. But she was healing. Slowly. Imperfectly, but healing nonetheless. The door buzzed. Rachel, right on time. Maya hit the intercom, unlocked the building door, listened to footsteps on the stairs. You opened her apartment door before Rachel could knock. Something smells amazing, Rachel said, pulling her into a hug. The boys tumbled in behind her, already heading for the video games. It's an experiment. No guarantees it's edible. With you cooking, it'll be great. Rachel followed her into the kitchen, accepted a glass of wine. So, I have news. Good news or bad news? Good news. Great news, actually. David got the promotion. We're moving to the city. Maya stopped stirring, turned to face her sister. Seriously? Seriously. Brooklyn, probably. We want the boys to stay in their school, but close enough that we can actually see each other more than once a month. Rachel, that's incredible. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, sudden and unexpected. I've missed you. No, all of you. We've missed you too. Rachel's expression grew serious. You know, I've been thinking about what you went through, what you did changing those locks, how brave that was. Maya shook her head. It wasn't brave. It was just necessary. Survival. Same thing sometimes. Rachel sipped her wine, looked around the apartment. You've built a good life here, a real one. I'm proud of you, you know that? I'm proud of me too, Maya said, and realized she meant it. They cooked together, the 4 of them crowding into the kitchen, the boys helping in ways that made everything take twice as long and created 3 times the mess. They ate at the table Maya had bought from a flea market, mismatched chairs and a wobbly leg, but it was hers. They laughed and told stories, and the boys showed her drawings they'd made at school. Later, after Rachel and the boys left, after Maya had cleaned up and put away the leftovers and wiped down the counters, she stood at the window again. Same view, same city, same 14th floor apartment. But everything was different. She thought about James sometimes, wondered if he'd changed, if he'd learned anything, if he was treating his new girlfriend better than he'd treated her. Doubted it mostly. Men like that rarely changed. They just found new victims, started the cycle over. But that wasn't her problem anymore. Wasn't her responsibility. She'd saved herself, or been given the chance to save herself, by whatever cosmic accident had sent her back. She couldn't save anyone else. Could only hope they'd find their own strength when they needed it. She thought about the other Maya, the one who'd swallowed those pills. Who'd decided that not existing was easier than existing in pain. Wondered if that version of her was truly gone, erased by this new timeline, or if she still existed somewhere, a ghost haunting a different dimension. I'm sorry, she thought, not sure who she was apologizing to. I'm sorry you didn't make it out. I'm sorry I didn't save you sooner. But she'd saved herself this time, had changed the locks, literal and metaphorical, had built a life she could stand to live in, had learned to recognize love from control, support from manipulation, care from possession. Her phone buzzed again. A text from a number she didn't recognize at first, then remembered. Michael, from her painting class. They'd been talking more lately, had gone for coffee a few times. Nothing serious, nothing pressured. Just easy conversation and genuine interest and the kind of attention that felt like sunlight instead of a spotlight. Great seeing you today. Want to check out that gallery opening next week? Maya looked at the message for a long moment, felt the old fear rise up. What if he turned out like James? What if she couldn't tell the difference? What if she made the same mistakes again? But then she remembered. She'd survived the worst already, had died and come back and fought her way free. had learned to trust herself, to listen to her instincts, to leave at the first red flag instead of waiting until she was drowning. She wasn't the same woman who'd fallen for James's charm, wasn't the same woman who'd mistaken control for love. She was someone different now, someone stronger, someone who'd changed the locks. She typed back, "Sounds great." "See you there." Hit send. Turned off the lights and went to bed in an apartment that was hers, in a life that was hers, in a future she was writing one choice at a time. The lock stayed changed, the door stayed closed, and Maya finally was free. 3 years after that, Maya stood in a different apartment, not the one she'd fought for, though she still owned it. She rented it out now, used the income to fund her art. This apartment was in Brooklyn, closer to Rachel, a top-floor walk-up with skylights and exposed brick, and enough space for a proper studio. The walls were covered in her paintings. Not all of them good, not all of them even competent, but getting better. She'd had a show at a small gallery in Chelsea 6 months ago, sold 3 pieces, got a review in a local arts blog that called her work raw and honest, well, informed by a deep understanding of survival. She'd cried when she read that. Good tears this time. She was painting now, working on a new piece. Abstract mostly, swirls of color that moved from dark to light, from chaos to clarity. She didn't know what it meant yet. Didn't need to. Just let her hands move. Let the colors speak. Let the process unfold. Her phone rang. She almost ignored it. She was in the zone, didn't want to break the flow, but something made her look at the screen. Unknown number, but the area code was familiar. She answered, paintbrush still in her hand. "Hello? Is this Maya Chen?" A woman's voice, young, uncertain. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Sophie. I got your number from a mutual friend. You don't know me, but I know I dated James Sterling. I heard that you had a relationship with him too." Maya's hand tightened on the phone, set down her paintbrush carefully, precisely in the water jar. "Is he hurting you?" A sharp intake of breath. "How did you—" "I know what he's like. I know how he operates." Maya sat down on her paint-stained stool, her heart racing. "Are you safe right now? Do you need help?" I'm at my sister's place. I left yesterday. He doesn't know where she lives." Sophie's voice cracked. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy. They all love him. He's so charming, so successful, and I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But then I found the conviction on his record, the restraining order, and I looked you up, and I needed to talk to someone who would understand." Maya closed her eyes, saw herself at 28, at 35, at 41. Saw all the versions of herself who hadn't known, hadn't understood, hadn't been able to see what was happening until it was too late. "You're not crazy," she said firmly. "You're not overreacting. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you saw, it's real. Trust yourself." "He says I'm imagining things, that I'm paranoid." "That's what he does. That's what men like him do. They make you doubt yourself until you can't trust your own perceptions." Sophie was crying now, soft sounds over the phone. "I don't know what to do. I don't know how to. I loved him. Part of me still does. Part of me wants to go back, wants to believe him when he says he'll change." "He won't change," Maya said gently. "He'll promise he will. He'll cry, he'll apologize, he'll do everything right for a while, and then it'll start again. Maybe slower, maybe more subtly, but it'll start again." How did you get out?" Maya looked around her studio. At the paintings on the walls, the life she'd built, the freedom she'd fought for. Thought about changing the locks. About standing on the other side of that door and saying no. About all the days and weeks and months after when she'd had to keep saying no, keep fighting, keep choosing herself over and over again. "I changed the locks," she said, "and I never let him back in." They talked for an hour. Maya gave Sophie the numbers for domestic violence hotlines, recommended her therapist, told her about tenant rights and restraining orders, and all the practical things she'd learned. But more than that, she listened, believed, validated. When they finally hung up, Maya sat in the fading afternoon light, surrounded by her paintings, in the life she'd built from the ruins of the one she'd been given. She didn't know if Sophie would make it out. Didn't know if she'd find the strength to stay away, to resist the pull of James's promises and charm, and the comfortable lie that things could go back to how they were in the beginning. But Maya had told her the truth, had been the voice she'd needed in that other timeline, the one who said, "You're not crazy. Trust yourself. You deserve better." Maybe it would be enough. Maybe it wouldn't. All Maya could do was keep painting, keep living, keep being the proof that it was possible to survive, to escape, to build something beautiful from the wreckage. She picked up her paintbrush again, dipped it in cerulean blue, added another stroke to the canvas, watching light emerge from darkness. The locks had stayed changed, the door had stayed closed, and Maya had stayed free. She painted until the sun set, until the studio was bathed in the golden light of evening, until her back ached and her fingers cramped, and she'd captured something on the canvas that felt true, that felt earned, that felt like hope. Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of people, millions of stories, millions of locked doors and opened windows and chances taken and chances missed. The world turned, indifferent and beautiful and terrible and full of possibility. Maya cleaned her brushes, organized her paints, covered the canvas to let it dry, made herself dinner, pasta with vegetables from the farmer's market, a recipe she'd invented herself, ate while watching the sunset paint the Brooklyn rooftops in shades of amber and rose. Her phone buzzed. Michael, asking if she wanted to come to a concert next weekend. They'd been dating for a year now, slow and easy, no pressure, no expectations beyond enjoying each other's company. He'd met Rachel and the boys, had painted with her in the studio, had held her on the nights when the nightmares came and she woke up gasping, back in that other timeline, trapped in that other life. He knew about James. About the trial, the restraining order, the whole messy history. She'd told him early, watching his face carefully for signs of judgment or discomfort, or the kind of possessiveness that masqueraded as protectiveness. Instead, he just nodded and said, "Thank you for trusting me with that," and then asked if she wanted more coffee. Maya typed back, "Sounds perfect." And it did. All of it. The concert, the relationship, the life she was living. Not perfect in the fairy tale sense. She still had hard days, still struggled sometimes, still carried scars that would probably never fully heal, but perfect in the sense that it was hers. Chosen. Built with intention and care, and the hard-won knowledge of what she wanted and what she wouldn't tolerate. That night, she dreamed about the bathroom floor, the cold tiles, the empty bottles, the life draining away. But this time, when she looked up, she saw herself standing in the doorway. Not the dying version, the current version, paint under her fingernails, strength in her spine, keys in her pocket. The standing Maya extended her hand. The dying Maya took it. And somewhere between sleep and waking, between the life that was and the life that is, Maya understood that she'd saved them both. That every choice she'd made, every lock she'd changed, every door she'd closed had been for both versions of herself, the one who'd needed saving and the one who'd done the saving. She woke up in the morning to sunlight streaming through her skylights, to the smell of coffee from the pot she'd set on a steamer, to the sound of her phone buzzing with messages from people who loved her, Rachel sending photos of the boys, Michael sharing a meme he thought she'd like, her painting class group chat planning their next session. Maya stretched, smiled, got out of bed, started her day in an apartment she'd chosen, in a life she'd built, with locks that stayed changed and a future that was entirely, beautifully her own. The past was gone, both versions of it. The future was uncertain, as all futures are, but the present was hers. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, that was enough.
Oh my god. Maybe am I Perginat? Maybe I am Pregananant. Guys, type exclamation mark, enter slides on it, doodles on it. Aki. It looks like the Windows XP screen. It does, Uzali, it does. It does. It literally does. Aki, thank you. Exclamation mark, enter, you guys, if you would like to enter to win a tits and boobies mug. Let me show it to you what you could have. Let me show unto you what you could win. I always know when it's you. I do. Thank you so much. It's my tits and boobies mug. It's a classic. It's a good fun for the whole family. Tits and also boobies. Exclamation mark enter. You have exclamation mark cheat. Worth a try, Mandy. If you win, you're going to start something. Yeah, good job, Sly. It's the mag. It's the good mag. And it's great for the whole family. They are indeed nice tits. They're great. They're great tits. Brombello! Hi, welcome in! Exclamation mark enter, let's fucking go. And you can be anywhere in the world and it will ship to you. They have shipping centers. Ah, bloody hell! Thank you for the follow. Welcome. They have shipping centers all around the world, so you hopefully, sounds like, also don't have to pay the stinky import fees. Tits be perky. They do be. Pair of them, slightly different sizes and shapes, and that's completely normal and natural. B. Rastal! Congratulations! You've won yourself tits and boobies in one beautiful, beautiful mug. We may have to pay import. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't on these ones. On these gifts from the website. No. They have centers all around. Rigged. Stop the steal. Rigged for your pleasure. Congratulations. Ah. And we have 15, 17, 16. We have seconds.